Hello, welcome back to the Care and Conversation studio, live from the Care Show at the NEC in Birmingham. I've said that like 19 times today, and every time it feels longer and longer. It feels about a minute just to say where we are. But we're here in Birmingham, and we're with Sonia. Hello.
Hello, thank you for having me.
How are you doing?
I'm really well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Good journey today? Good journey in?
Took a little bit longer than I expected.
It took everyone quite a long time. You actually live in Birmingham.
Yeah, I
nearby,
live in Wolverhampton.
So it's like 5 minutes up the road, right?
Yeah, not that far, but a little bit longer getting when I got closer in. Lots of traffic.
Yeah.
Lots of horse boxes for the
because there's a horse show.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, right. So, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yep, so my name's Sonia Rai. I'm the founder and director of Nectar HR. We are a national HR consultancy. We work in lots of different sectors, but we support a large client base in the health and social care sector.
Awesome. Right, so we had a little chat offline before about what we were going to talk about, and I think the first thing, most important thing, is there's some changes.
Yeah.
So what's hot off the press, it literally was like yesterday, right?
So there is actually quite a few changes been going on this year. Some of them, when we're working with clients, we find that some of the changes that have come out in April, they're still not fully up to date with.
Right.
So I think it's really important to know what's changing. One of the biggest changes that we had earlier this year was changes to flexible working applications. So previously you had to be with your employer for 26 weeks or more, and then you could make one flexible working application in a year. That's now changed, so it's a day one right. So someone could literally start in your organisation on the first day and make a flexible working application. The process has changed slightly, but also they're now allowed to make 2 applications per year. So that's a big change. There's changes around the responsibility on employers and the actions and steps that they're taking to prevent sexual harassment in the workplace. And there's changes to the Employment Rights Bill that's kind of coming through. And we're going to be doing some updates on that end of this month, early next month as well. So, making sure that our clients are compliant. We update policy and things like that, but I think it's really important for people to really understand what that means practically for them in their organisation.
Yeah, there's a few things in there, isn't there?
There
that
is.
You should really be sort of slapped around the face and made aware of.
Yeah.
Because ultimately, as a care company, you're probably recruiting perpetually.
Yeah.
So from a certain date, the rules will change.
Rights, and I think with the change in government, we've now got Labour in government, there's going to be more changes that are coming in as well. I think it's a case of watch this space. We had a lot of updates around COVID, but not really major changes, and there was a bit of a hold off with Brexit and everything like that. And now it's been a really busy year in terms of employment law updates, but it's not just employment law updates that you need to be aware of. There's case law happening all the time and some pretty interesting cases, and we're there to interpret what that means for our client. Does that mean a bit of a change in policy, a bit of change in the way that we do things? A big thing that I've seen here today, and I've seen at the last few care shows, is tech and AI, the usage of that. And the one thing I would say to people is you need to be really mindful of tech in general, but AI in your organisation, and how it can directly discriminate, and you don't even know don't even know that that's happening. We've had some really interesting conversations, but also your employees using AI in the workplace. Have you considered that? Do you want them doing that? If so, or if you don't want them doing that, you need to set the parameters around that. You just need to make your mind up,
don't you, really, and say, is it okay for you to respond to an email with AI? Yes or no?
Yeah.
And if it's yes, these are the conditions that you need to fit.
Absolutely.
This is the program. You need to stay accountable. We need to have a track, because I think in a lot of cases it can be useful technology. I think just to say no is probably slightly short-sighted.
I think it's amazing, and what it can do, I don't really think we know what it can do, and I think it'd be so interesting to see where this goes in the next few years. But I think from an employment and HR perspective, it's almost like the new social media. So when social media came about, from a HR perspective, we were all scrambling around going, someone wrote something on Facebook, we've never dealt with this before, we don't have a policy for it. And there was a lot of dismissals that were found to be unfair because organisations hadn't communicated what was and wasn't acceptable to their employees. So I think with all the employment law changes, yes, but really think about what's going on in the landscape. And I think people tend to think how that impacts operations, how they're going to get training for that system, but it's just thinking a little bit more outside the box and thinking how else that's going to impact them.
So should we not be using AI to write policies, employment policies?
I definitely wouldn't advocate that. And the reason being, it's very Americanized.
Yeah, okay, sorry, carry on.
It's very Americanized, and it's very generic and very general. So, I mean, you know me, York, I'm not a fan of generic, off-the-shelf HR at all, whether it comes to your contracts of employment, your policies, your processes, simply because when there is an issue, and it only takes you to have a small team for there to be that one issue. If we haven't, as HR professionals, got the right toolkit with a good contract and good policies in place. I'll give you an example. We supported a dom care provider recently. He was like, yeah, no, I've got the contract, everything's already sorted. There was an issue with a very senior member of staff, and we couldn't place that person on garden leave because there was no clause in the contract. We found a workaround, but it wasn't just a simple, right, this is what we're going to do. And even he couldn't believe that wasn't in his contract of employment. Like I said, we found the workaround, but that's now prompted him to say, can you review my contract? Yeah. And actually, we're just going to start again.
I mean, ultimately, they're legal documents, right? So a misplaced comma can be enough to invalidate a whole paragraph of a policy, right?
I think they need to be really clear. I mean, some of the ones that we see, especially in this sector, are so vague, written really poorly. It normally takes me about 15 minutes maximum to scan a contract of employment and think, right, it needs this, this and this. I understand what the employer's responsibilities are, etc. With some of the ones that we've seen recently, it feels like they're written in like kind of 18th century English, and I'm scratching my head thinking, what does that refer to? What is that? And it's very, very wordy. Yeah. You just need to make these kind of things really simple, really clear. Make sure you've got business protection. So, and actually make sure it's right for your organisation.
And so how does this sort of affect then the future of the workforce? And in terms of, there's new people coming to the sector all the time. Obviously from today, tomorrow, whenever it is, there's some changes in terms of the rules that we need to adopt. How does that impact the workforce in general? What trends are we seeing in terms of what people are expecting from work as they come into the sector?
I think the world has changed massively because of COVID, and it's something we've spoken about before. When it comes to what people want from a job role, obviously it's different for everyone, we're all unique. But when you're looking at the surveys that are undertaken, salary isn't normally top of the list. People want different things. Yes, they want to be remunerated appropriately for the job that they're doing. But there's things like flexibility, which I know is not easy in this sector. There's things like being recognised at work, being remembered, so knowing that your manager's manager actually knows who you are and what you did. And also things like development for people. So do you have conversations with people about when they're joining your organisation, where do they want to be in the next 12 months, 2 years? Some people might say, I'm really happy at this level and this is all I want to do. Some people might have a progression plan and actually think, oh wow, someone's had a conversation with me and they're going to invest in me to stay here and develop myself, and that's only going to be an asset to your organisation if you do it properly. So I think that there are other things that you need to be thinking about. Remuneration, yes. Obviously benefits, but when it comes to benefits, I don't think you have to go overboard with spending huge amounts of money to get some great benefits packages in place for your employees. And that might be different support from your typical high street vouchers to actually counselling support and sessions for them and their family when they need it. Because, we see a lot of, stress is the number one reason for sickness absence in the UK. If you've got a counselling programme in place through your benefits provider, that's going to support your sickness absence rates. And that's one thing we hear a lot of, is concerning in the sector. So I would say, yes, be fair with your remuneration, looking at your benefits package, looking at how and where you can offer flexibility and variety in roles. But also talking to people is just so important. Finding out what's important to them, how could we support them as an individual, because what person A wants might not be what person B wants. And I'm not talking big things, I'm talking small things that might make them feel that little bit more a part of that organisation, rather than, oh, great, first day, there you go, off you go, run and go and cover this for us. Taking the time to get to know people, training them appropriately, supporting their development, remembering when it's their birthday, all of these kind of things just make a huge difference.
Yeah. While you were talking there, I just came up with an idea.
Okay.
Which I think, exclusive, first look at this idea. Person-centred employment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Because that ultimately is what we're talking about, isn't it, really?
Yeah.
That you need to look at the individual. You have your policies in place, but you need to be able to go to that person and say, what do you need? And person A might need flexibility, where person B might need more hours, where person C might need just something completely different, that might appreciate the counselling service, or I think the key is to ask people.
Absolutely. I think knowing what motivates them as individuals is so important. And even if you're a large organisation, that's something you can delegate out to your managers, and you can support them with your processes to be able to have those conversations. I think another one that I'm going to say, which people might think, how does that help in the workforce scenario, is actually having difficult conversations with staff when you need to. What we hear a lot of is, somebody wants to speak to me about my sickness absence, but this person is always off on a Friday and my manager's just ignored it because they're a difficult person, and I kind of feel like I've had to pick up the slack for so long. So being consistent as well. A lot of the time, York, when something comes to us from a client, there's been so many missed opportunities and it's snowballed into quite a serious or complex HR issue, and you just think, if you just sat down and had a conversation at the start, had the difficult conversation, set the expectations, supported that person, found out why this is going on. Well,
it's probably difficult because you've left it, right? So the conversations aren't difficult if you have them straight away.
Absolutely.
And again, I think it's one of those things that, sometimes it's easier not to say, that's the third time you've been off on a Wednesday. What's going on? And challenge it, because
nobody wants to have that difficult conversation. But again, one of the things that I find is really poor when we're working with clients, and we'll work with them to change this, we do a lot of bespoke policy, is the forms and the processes that they have are really poor. They're not asking the right questions. So they might have a return to work interview, but they're not asking the right questions of that person. They're not finding out if there's a reason in the workplace for them having had that sickness absence. They're not picking up on patterns or repetition. They're not talking about triggers, so they're missing all the opportunities. So instead of going, York's having this conversation with me, it's there's a form from HR that's come through, and York has to ask me these questions. And you just don't know what that might open up. It might be that actually I'm really struggling at the moment because of, and this is actually the real reason why I was off sick. Okay, well, what can we do to support you with that? And dealing with those scenarios will motivate the rest of the team, because they can become very disengaged very quickly if they see that you just allow this and it impacts your culture.
Yeah. So what's the sort of top tip that you can share around kind of something that people should be looking at right now to protect themselves or make their employment conditions better?
I think really getting yourself up to date with what's going on from an employment perspective, and don't make it onerous. So what I would be looking at is, the Gov website, the ACAS website. They're very simple and easy to understand. If you're using a provider like us for your HR, great, because we're gonna talk you through it and we're gonna hold your hand. But if you're not necessarily doing that, get yourself on the ACAS website, have a look on the Gov website, and just understand what the new responsibilities are for yourself. I think from a risk perspective, that would be the biggest thing. Yeah,
because ultimately you can manage the risk, but you've got to know about it.
Exactly.
So there you go. So read the ACAS website or the Gov website. And check it out. Right, okay, well, thank you.
Thank you
for coming
so
to
much.
the studio. I will see you soon. Right, we're going to come back shortly with another interview.